Welcome back. We're continuing with David Hume and the problem of evil. We're going to consider in this video the extent of natural and moral evil, misery and wickedness. So remember, Demea and Philo said the world is full of misery and wickedness. Now, how full is it? People try to deny this. We could think, are there good people? Are you a good person? If so, then it's not full. So maybe they're wrong. Or maybe they're right and we're not good people. So let's look at this. We have 17 different points on the extent of natural and moral evil. And I'm going to go through each of these. And I have some notes in front of me, some quotes and things to make it a little more dramatic. Because if you read this, it is really dramatic and funny. It's very funny. I think you should read the text and find this in the text. All right, so the first point they go over is Demea and Philo talk about nature versus nature. Animals are devouring each other. One poet said, nature is red in tooth and claw. So why would God create a world in which everything in nature is at war with itself? So think about this. The animal world is predator and prey. All right, if that's not that bad, what about nature versus humans? Nature versus us. Did you know that nature's at war with you? Now we have like killer viruses. We have killer plants, cancer, AIDS, allergies. Do you have allergies? It's plants trying to make a home in your mucous membranes. Ew. And if it's not that, animals want to eat us too. And if it's not that, we have extremes in nature and things like extreme cold, extreme hot, earthquakes, fires, tsunamis. So it does seem like nature is at war with humans, and we do everything in our power to avoid it. We wear clothes. We have air conditioners. It's getting warm here. Summer in Arizona. Does it have to be so hot? All right, so then they move on to talk about man versus man, human versus human. Think about the course of human history. What have we done to one another? Oppression, enslavement, wars, torture. High school. High school is a small picture of this. Did you go to high school? Was it torture? Sometimes, right? So what do we do to each other? Human history is the history of humans versus humans. And if it isn't that, maybe it's man versus woman, or human in relationship to other humans. The love life. It starts off in true love and it ends in true hate. I'm going to sue you. I want the cat. And we fight. The war of the relationships. Okay? And if that's not bad, we go to war with ourselves. What do we do to ourselves? Now, if you read this in the dialogues, they talk about all these self-inflicted fears and phobias. We have self-inflicted mental illness and manic depression and anxiety. We stress ourselves out. We worry about the future. So this is all kinds of misery and wickedness, and it's pretty bad, right? It seems like it's pretty bad, and it's getting worse. Now, this has been Demea and Philo. Now we get to Cleanthes, and he says, wait a minute, guys. Perhaps this is just the expression of a bad attitude. And so Cleanthes says, no. Maybe some people, like the poets, the emo singers, the existential philosophers, they have a bad attitude and they get more airtime, so they spread their bad attitude and they afflict us with it. It's like the Debbie Downers. They get all of us down with their bad attitude. Philo responds and says, well, perhaps the poets and the emo singers are more sensitive to the suffering that we've been describing, and you, Cleanthes, are hardened to suffering. So it's not that there's not a problem. There is a problem, and the poets are more sensitive to the problem. They feel it because they're sensitive, whereas others don't feel it because they're hardened, and that just makes it all the worse. So Cleanthes comes back and says, perhaps ignorance is bliss then. If you don't know about it, then you can still be happy. Right? I know people like this. They don't want to turn the news on because they don't want to know about bad news. They don't want to know what's going on out there. Just keep me ignorant. Maybe you've said this. Ignorance is bliss. Think about the condition of the world where that's true. The only way to be happy is to not know anything? To be like Homer Simpson? No, ignorance is not bliss. And Cleanthes, Philo says to Cleanthes, what are you then? Some kind of island of bliss in a sea of misery? You would have to not notice all the suffering going on around you, and you would have to be insensitive to your fellow human. Remember this claim, no man is an island? Well, you island of bliss people aren't either. Everyone around you is suffering. Have you no compassion on your fellow humans? So that doesn't go over very well. And then Cleanthes comes back and says, well, you know what? If it's that bad, then why aren't more people committing suicide? Every day people vote yay to life by getting out of bed in the morning. Now, I want to pause here because this is something that Hamlet also considered. If you read Hamlet in high school, I hope you did. And if not, then I'm going to read some Hamlet to you. This is in the soliloquy from Act 3, Scene 1, lines 57 to 83, if you want to know. But Hamlet struggles with this question also. Remember, he's a young man. His father's been killed, and the ghost of his father asks Hamlet to revenge his death. And Hamlet's kind of an indecisive guy. And so he has this moment where he considers suicide. You know this one, right? To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. And then I'm going to skip a few lines to near the end of this soliloquy. But that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. So what's he saying here? He's wanting to die. He's like, yeah, it's life is hard. There's all these bad things that happen to us. It's full of misery and wickedness. But what if the other side is worse? So he is not going to commit suicide because on the other side it could be worse. And so this is what Philo does too. He says more people don't commit suicide because they're terrified into living for fear of the other side, for fear of maybe taking your life and having to go to hell, because some religions teach that. So suicide is not an option for many because they fear. All right, well, then they go into this discussion. What is the hope then? What hope do we have in this world full of misery and wickedness? And they consider these things: retirement, nature, knowledge, family, and friends. So let's look at these. Is retirement a hope? I don't know. Think about it. What do retired people do? What are they doing in Sun City? Do you know Sun City? It's in Arizona. It's where the retired people go. I've been through that place. It's like people waiting to die. I don't know. So what do? You play golf and wait for death? So retirement doesn't seem like such a great hope. What about nature? Some people find hope in nature. But have you ever been camping? Why don't you just stay out there? How come you always come back? Because it's boring, right? And we have nature versus man. So most people don't stay out in nature because it gets boring. We miss our comfort. So that's not a source of hope. What about knowledge? Some people say knowledge is a source of hope. Yeah, but they say the more you know, the more you're aware of this problem of evil, the more you understand the suffering there is in the world. So I don't know if knowledge is a hope. What about family and friends? Are they a hope? Well, either you love them and they succumb to death eventually, or you love them and you quarrel with them. Perhaps they ruin your wedding plans. So family and friends, it turns out, not a source of hope. They either die or you're going to strive with them. All right, so now we get into deeper stuff. Now, this is where we have to go beyond what Hume does. I mean, it's deeper than what Hume considers the problem of evil. So how about this? I'm going to say something crazy to you, and you can think about it. If we were good, we would never die. If you were good, you would never die physically. So if you're good morally, you wouldn't die physically. What? So there's going to be a connection between natural evil, misery, and moral evil, wickedness. If we were good, you wouldn't die. You wouldn't get old. You wouldn't get sick. You wouldn't die. So we have to figure out why is that? So what's the connection between those two? And is there anybody who's been good in human history? Well, everybody's died, so nobody's been good. So how deep is evil? Now, sometimes students bring up Jesus. Well, Jesus, he was good. Yeah, what happened to him? So look at the next one. What's the full extent of the denial of reason? So we're going to locate evil in the denial of reason, or the logos. The logos is the word or reason, and it's first in us as our thinking mechanism. Reason in us is how we understand. So if we deny reason in us, then we'll deny reason anywhere else. The logos in the world, the logos in scripture, the logos incarnate. So Jesus was the logos incarnate, and what did they do to him? The word came to his own and they killed him. That's called deicide. That's the worst kind of evil there is. If God came to humans to bring truth, humans kill God. So that's the full extent of the denial of the logos. You deny reason in yourself, so you deny reason, the word as it comes to you, full of grace and truth. So the full consequence of the denial of reason, though, what happens when we deny reason in ourselves? If we don't use reason, then we don't have meaning. If we don't have meaning, then we get bored. So you can see boredom is a human problem. And when we get bored, we can't stand it. So we fill our lives with stuff. And that stuff is also meaningless stuff. And so we fill it with more stuff and we go into excess. And we waste our time, our energy, our efforts, our life. And then we feel guilty about it. So this condition of meaninglessness, boredom, and guilt is a result of denying reason in ourselves. And it also is the result of all of the bad things we do. So the full consequence of the denial of reason, if we are in that condition, we'll call it spiritual death. Meaninglessness, boredom, and guilt. That's spiritual death. Then the full consequence is that continues forever. It's a kind of hell. So think of popular descriptions of hell. Lake of fire, weeping and gnashing of teeth, a bottomless pit, outer darkness. Those things are analogies for this spiritual condition. So when we don't use reason, we don't have meaning, we have a darkened mind, darkness. And when we don't have meaning, we're bored and we're burning with desire that can't be satisfied. That's the fire, the lake of fire. It's a fire that is never quenched. desires, burning of desires. And the weeping and gnashing of teeth, or the worm that doesn't die, is conscience. It's guilt, this feeling of guilt. And this is a condition that goes on forever. It's a bottomless pit. So these are popular descriptions of hell that have an analogy in philosophy. If you don't think, you can't understand, you can't have meaning, and boredom results and guilt results. And it's a condition that only gets worse and worse and worse. So that's the full consequence of the denial of reason. That's the depths of evil. Okay, now remember, this question of evil is set within the context of the existence of God. So if God is all good and all powerful, why all this evil? Why is it so full? Why is the world full of moral and natural evil? So let's go back to this original question. Point 3, Demea and Philo agree the world is full of misery and wickedness. Consider the many attempts to avoid facing the full extent of natural and moral evil. So hopefully we've gone through it and faced the objections, and we have to say, yeah, it's pretty bad. And so point 4, from 1 and 2, this was 1 here. Demea and Philo agree the religion arises from a sense of misery, and the world is full of misery. Evil should bring human beings to God. Why? Because they wanted to do this emotional appeal. Look at how bad it is. We're going to get them to feel it in their bones. They should come to believe in God. But now the question is, to what God? Philo springs on Demea the problem of evil. If God is all good and all powerful, why is there evil? The problem is either a contradiction or remains unsolvable. Or David Hume gives us another alternative. For all we know, maybe there's an easy solution. So is the existence of God's goodness, power, and evil a contradiction? Is it something we just can't know? Or is there an easy solution? So that's what we want to look at next. So we're going to look at the way David Hume attempts to solve this problem, and we'll see it's not very satisfactory. Then we'll look at the free will solution, and then we'll look at the ironic solution. And at the end of this discussion, we have to ask, do we have an explanation of why there's so much evil? Natural evil, misery, and moral evil, wickedness. Okay? Now, I should also tell you that David Hume is the skeptic that plays the part of Philo. So what Philo says is probably what Hume himself would have said. Lots of people think that Philo represents Hume's real position. So as we go on from here, I'm going to pause the lecture and let you take a break from this deep, dark discussion. But we're going to look at the solutions and responses. And I'm going to make this an exam question. So next time, we'll look at the 5 solutions and responses to the problem of evil. And we'll see, are these satisfactory, or are we wanting more at the end of this conversation? All right, so what did we talk about today? We went over the depths of natural and moral evil, or misery and wickedness. And we saw that the world is full of misery and wickedness, that if we were good, we wouldn't die. There wouldn't be natural evil if there wasn't moral evil. So we're going to have to find the connection between the two. And why would God allow this? All right, next time we'll go to the solutions.